So as we've seen, perhaps the biggest thing holding back nuclear power is not its real risks, but the perceived risks. The people are so scared of it. So why is there so much fear of all things nuclear? Well, there are many possible reasons for this, and it's been extensively investigated. One is distrust of experts. Yes, sure, the nuclear physicists say it's safe, but they're probably lying. They're in the pockets of industry. And there's certainly distrust of experts. Many experts have a bad track record. Governments have covered up dangerous things in the past. Physicists are particularly famous for being arrogant and not listening. So if someone is really worried about the thing, you have to listen to them and understand what their worry is. And not just talk over them and say, oh, you ignorant fool, this is not really dangerous. Just trust me, I'm a scientist. Another issue is ignorance of numbers. People tend to have a tendency to binary thinking. Something is either radioactive or not radioactive, like a food is either healthy or unhealthy. But of course, it's not really like that. Pretty much everything is radioactive at some level. It's actually a numbers game. And that's so people ask, is this radioactive? Are they going to have radioactive waste? They don't ask, how many millisieverts? And that's a problem. Because everything is radioactive, so it's easy to run a scare campaign about everything. In association with nuclear weapons are genuinely and scary for good reasons, and the word nuclear is in both. The fact that a nuclear power plant cannot explode and produce a bomb, that's a complication, people don't get that, but nuclear weapons kill people. Radioactive is invisible and scary, that's certainly true. You could be dying from radiation right now, how would you know? And then there's a media bias towards covering rare nuclear accidents. I mean, there have been 3 major nuclear accidents, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl and Fukushima, and everybody knows about them, whereas there have been huge numbers of chemical accidents and other accidents which people have not heard about. Let's look at this media bias. Take another example. When I first came to Australia, everyone back in England told me, oh, Australia's really dangerous. There are snakes and spiders and sharks and crocodiles. Maybe you've been told this as well. And indeed, the media has regular stories about surfer attacked by a shark or person bitten by a snake or the most poisonous snakes or spiders in the world coming from Australia. What actually is the most dangerous animal in Australia? Well, here are the actual stats. This is from the year 2000 to 2010, but hasn't much changed. The most dangerous animal in Australia is the horse. About 8 people a year die, mostly by falling off horses while riding them. Second most dangerous is cows, and then dogs. And sharks, snakes and crocodiles and spiders are way down the list. And this is thought to be an example of a bias that people are scared of things they can rapidly recall to their memory. Every time a shark attacks somebody, it makes the news not merely in Australia but around the world. Someone falling off a horse does not. So you can probably immediately remember news stories about a shark attack somewhere in Australia, but can you remember any stories about so-and-so fell off a horse and died? Probably not, unless it was a relative of yours. But in fact, far more people die from falling off horses. So it's the same. Nuclear power is dramatic, it gets worldwide newspaper coverage, so people think it's much more of a risk than it really is. Another example is crime. This is a classic case where surveys about what people think about crime and the reality are totally different. Surveys show that almost everyone in every country all the time thinks that crime is getting worse, increasing, whereas in fact in most places it's going down. Almost everyone overestimates what fraction of crime is violent, because a violent crime, someone with a knife coming into your house, that's newsworthy and exciting, but most crime is not violent. And almost everyone overestimates crime due to strangers, whereas in fact most crime, at least violent crime, is committed by friends and family. So nuclear accidents, the radiation is dramatic and invisible and scary, there's huge coverage. But remember, Fukushima, as far as we know, nobody died from radiation there. That really surprises almost everyone I say. Everyone assumes because there's so much coverage there must have been thousands of people who died. And in fact, thousands of people did die from Fukushima, but they died from suicide due to being evacuated from their homes. The suicide rate of people who were evacuated away from their homes and suddenly had to live in temporary accommodation away from their normal social networks went up, and by most estimates, thousands of people died from that. They weren't killed by the radiation. They make TV series about the Chernobyl accident, led to 50 direct deaths and maybe a few thousand delayed ones. But not, I haven't seen any TV coverage about air pollution in India, which is killing about 1.7 million people per year. It'd be interesting if there was a rule saying you must cover disasters in proportion to how many people died. In that case, our TV would be completely covered with air pollution movies, but they might be quite boring. So what can we do about this human tendency to concentrate on the dramatic and rare and to therefore have a warped idea of risks? Well, I don't know. I wish I did. One idea that's been floated is to have a unit for small risks of death. I don't think this will ever catch on with the general public, but it's an interesting concept. The idea is to express small risks in terms of a micromort, whereas a 1 in a million chance of dying. And this allows us to compare very small but very different numbers, because there are lots of things that give us a low risk of dying. But you say, oh, that's unlikely, this is unlikely, and that's unlikely. But some unlikely can be a million times more common than another unlikely thing. So unless we have numbers, all small risks seem the same. So the chance of a random person of dying every day is about 10 micromorts on average, more if you're older. So that's the background level of chance of being killed. And here are some calculations of micromorts for different things. So if you drive 100 kilometers in a car, you've got a 0.4 in a million chance of dying. Whereas driving 100 kilometers on a motorbike, it's 10 micromorts. One day in the worst region of Fukushima, that's the 40 millisievert region right close to the reactor, gives you about 6 micromorts. So still less than you get from one day just natural living. Scuba dives about 8 micromorts. Your chance of being murdered per year in Australia is about 9 micromorts. Said driving motorbikes is much more dangerous, but one day in an Indian city like New Delhi on a bad pollution day is 15 micromorts. If you smoke a pack of cigarettes, it's 30. So you can see that, yes, there is a risk from radiation, but there are many other risks that people take every day which are arguably worse, or at least comparable. An interesting recent example is people getting worried about dying from a COVID vaccination. But if you're not vaccinated and you're a 25-year-old, you've got a 100 micromorts chance of dying from a COVID vaccination. If you're my age, it's a 4,000 micromort case if you catch COVID if you're not vaccinated. I am vaccinated, of course. And climbing Mount Everest is incredibly dangerous, 38,000 micromorts. So this maybe is a good way for you to get your brain around the different low risks of different things. But will it ever catch on with the media? I don't think so.